Part 4 of Danielle. Walter stopped by his storage locker and picked up a few things. He dressed up for the occasion and threw on his black suit, rifled through his badges that he'd acquired through a life of crime, and retrieved a silenced Beretta that was so dusty he wasn't entirely certain it would shoot. He went with his badge from the Department of Homeland Security over the FBI because he felt that a lot of people may have new FBI protocols, while most were very unclear as to what a Homeland Security agent's jurisdictions and capabilities were, especially post-invasion. He asked for all the names of people that went to the art showing the night before, and he didn't even get a sideways look. He found Danielle's name easily and found a few names he could look up. After he found a name, he just called, and if the voice didn't sync up to how he remembered, he just moved to the next in line. From his investigation, he got 2 possibilities, and 2 that just didn't answer. He decided to pay the unknown 2 a visit. Walter approached an apartment in a yuppie neighborhood full of wannabe artists and quasi-intellectuals. It was the 2nd floor in a building complex that had another identical door flanking it. He knocked a few times, but didn't get a response. He went around back, hoping to get a stray glance through some window, but all that greeted him was darkness. Walter easily picked the lock and went in. He thought to reach for his gun, but he decided against it, feeling that if he walked in with it out, it increased the chances he'd use it, and he couldn't risk it being on someone who didn't have it coming. The back door opened up to the kitchen. There was literally dust on the stove. He curiously opened the refrigerator, only to see a few pizza boxes empty, half-eaten Chinese food, and ketchup. He noticed that everything was neatly labeled, but not with the common letters, but with the bumpy dots of Braille characters. He shook his head and figured this was obviously not the house, but he figured he was already breaking and entering. May as well see it through. It wasn't as if your sentence was reduced for the amount of time spent inside. He approached the living room, and there he looked at a few pictures hanging over the fake fireplace nearly all modern apartments had. There was something there, though something he didn't quite understand. There was a picture of Danielle and someone that must have been her twin sister. He couldn't actually tell which one was her. She seemed to be about high school age. Neither girl in the photo were close to the bombshell that he saw last night. It was obvious she blossomed somewhere along the way. Though the other now obvious question he had to ask himself was, why did they both seem blind in the picture? They both had canes, along with the unfocused stare that came along with the condition. One of them had to have sight, or more correctly, Danielle had to. He put the photo down with his gloved hand, wondering why a blind person needed a picture at all. He looked around a bit and saw a bookshelf full of Braille books. He entered the bathroom and he saw more beauty products and makeup than a Hollywood movie set. He ignored that and checked the medicine cabinet. There he found medication for Danielle and Denise. He couldn't quite make out the prescriptions. The words just sounded like vowels strung together haphazardly. But now he knew that 2 of them lived there. He noticed one room hadn't been used for a while, and there was even dust on the dresser. The other room was used, and nothing was meticulously sorted or put away in a way that a person without sight may. Even had an iPad thrown on the bed. Walter had to admit he didn't understand much of what was happening here, but he hadn't come to understand her life. He had come to find out if she lived through the attack. He retrieved a small device about the size of a quarter and stuck it on a high-up grate. It had adhesive on the back and did not move. He didn't much care if she found it or not. He just wanted to see if she'd come back. Walter enacted phase 2 of his plan, and that consisted of him figuring out if this attack was an isolated incident. The only way he could think to do such a thing was to go to the morgue and ask the coroner what happened. He may have been confident in his Homeland Security guys, but he wasn't yet ready to put that to the test and walk into a police station. He walked into the morgue with his head high, asked around about the body, and was easily directed to the basement. There he found Bradley Causeway, a relatively young man for such a job that took years of training. There were bodies laying about, some covered, some only half covered. When Walter approached him, he seemed to be staring blankly at a point in the wall, completely zoned out. There really wasn't smoking anywhere in this day and age, but if there ever were a place nobody'd blame you, it'd be here. "Hello?" said Walter, waiting to be acknowledged. After the third time, Bradley looked over. "Yeah," he said, as if someone startled him awake. "Alex Johnson, Homeland Security," said Walter, flashing his badge casually. Bradley didn't look at the ID anyway. He didn't seem to take much account of who came through where. Walter thought about it for a moment. If Bradley had been working through the invasion, chances were he had seen shit that was bound to detach you from reality. "Came to take a look at Alejandro Ramirez?" "Oh, the artist," said Bradley, perking up. "I've never seen anything quite like it." He walked over to the slab, the one in which the body was completely covered. Walter had to brace himself for the horror he was about to see, but Bradley just flipped the sheet over like it was any other Tuesday. It was just as awful as he remembered, maybe even more so now that the adrenaline of the moment had dissipated. "Looks like his eyes were chewed out, but I can't think of even an animal that could do something like this. The waxmen tended to use some sort of acid laser, so it couldn't be them. I heard rumors of dragon people living on Earth even before the invasion. So yeah, this ain't even that. It reminds me of a worm or something." Walter cut him off. It seemed like this tragedy got him spinning his wheels. "Has something like this happened before?" asked Walter. Bradley shook his head. Well, what? The neck wound is somewhat familiar. I've had 2 bodies with calculated strikes to the voice box, but they didn't have heads," Bradley said. Walter took a moment and recalled the creature's attempt to rip off Alejandro's head. The only reason it didn't finish was because he interrupted it. "You know, most times, if you want to dispose of a body and you don't want us to ID the Vic, typically you take the head and the hands. So what do you think made a stab like that?" "A stab like that, huh? Real official sounding," Bradley said with a chuckle, but he didn't seem to question Walter's identity even still. "I think it looks like a bone knife, maybe fashioned from a sharpened femur." Walter nodded. He wasn't that far from the truth. He did wonder now what the significance of the head was. But the idea of the truth made him not even want to speculate, because it seemed as if it could have been any random reason under the sun. He was certain now that this creature, whatever it was his problem, and he couldn't dig his head in the sand and pretend it didn't happen. Danielle wore all black, with a black-rimmed hat, because she was in mourning, but she had one last thing to do before she could relax. She may have made a mess, but no one could make the claim she wasn't willing to clean it up. She was beautiful, even covered up, and when she asked to see Alejandro, they didn't even ask why. When she entered the morgue, she noticed 2 men talking. The one in the suit felt familiar, but she couldn't place him. She needed a moment alone with the body, and with the way she looked, there weren't many people that just didn't automatically do her bidding. Being as hot as she was better than magic. When she entered, the 2 men's jaws dropped. Walter saw Danielle walking into the morgue. Bradley was genuinely floored by her beauty, but he was shocked for an entirely different reason.